Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Visually Hidden podcast. In case you're not familiar with us, Visually Hidden is pretty much an independent film production company. We work in features, short films, documentaries, music videos, and other assorted media. We have a music branch, Best Served Cold Records, where we release our soundtracks and other related artists. And we have a publishing side, Visually Hidden Press, where we handle all of our publications. I've been doing this for about 20 years now, and I finally decided to pull the trigger on a podcast. And with me today are a couple of the Visually Hidden family members. First, we have Mr. Steven Bendler, who you may remember from such films as the Visually Hidden produced feature Misery Loves Company, as well as our short film Trick or Treat, two films which we'll probably be discussing at length throughout this podcast series. Why don't you go ahead and say hello, Steven?
Hey, how are you? I'm excited to be here. I can't wait to talk movies. I can't wait to talk all things entertainment and independent entertainment specifically. So yeah, this is exciting. I've actually been looking forward to this.
Okay, great. And joining us live via satellite from Paris, France is the lovely Miss Anne Milleville. She is our social media marketing manager. She has joined us this past year and has really helped us get our act together as far as social media is concerned. She keeps us on schedule and she just helps us create the posts and brainstorm and everything. So welcome, Anne.
Thank you for this invitation. And the podcast is really a thrilling experience for me.
Very cool. And as I said, we are an independent film production company, and we've done quite a bit over the last 20 years. We've released a number of different kinds of films and worked and collaborated on a number of different kinds of films. We've done comedy, we've done drama, we've done documentaries, music videos, as I've said. And the one thing that really kind of is always lingering in the background is horror. A lot of independent films and filmmakers, they usually have an origin in the horror genre. It's just a proven genre. It's fun, it's easy, there's a market for it. So a lot of times filmmakers will start their career or their experiences in horror. It's just the way it goes. And so as a result, there are a lot of horror films out there, some good, some bad, some ugly, and we're going to tackle some of them this month, and we wanted to share that experience and our insights with you. And let us know what you think in a comment or an email or a post or a share or whatever.
I'm not a big fan of horror movies.
Sorry.
Steve and I actually met while we were working on a horror film about, gee whiz, Steve, it's been about 20 years.
Yeah, wow. Yeah, 20 year. The 20-year mark is actually around the corner. That's pretty wild to think about because you think, oh, that's not so long ago. When I made that movie or when we did that trip, and it's like, no, it is that long ago.
The film in question is actually called Strange Aeons, and it was produced in 2004 by a filmmaker named Ray Zablocki. And I don't think it's ever actually been released. It did have some success on the festival circuit. We went to the H.P. Lovecraft Film Festival out in Portland, Oregon, and it was a lot of fun. It was a good experience, and through that, I got to meet Steve. So, Steve, what brought you to that project? Because again, as I said, as a filmmaker, I was just involved in horror films. You're an actor primarily, so what brought you into the horror genre?
I had started working on one horror film. One of the main actors who gets killed in the movie couldn't appear on set. He had a conflict with something else that he was doing, so they needed someone to be his body double. So I played the dead body in that, and they dragged me out of the tub. They wrapped me in a sheet. They covered me in chocolate syrup, and they threw me in the back of a vintage Cadillac that sometimes the trunk opened and sometimes didn't. So I'm claustrophobic, but anything for the film. So I'm in a sheet in my underwear, covered in chocolate syrup, and they're driving me around the neighborhood. And then they had dug a hole in the nearby park, and they threw me into the hole, and then started to, cover me with dirt. So that was my first experience on a horror film. And so then Aeons was my second horror film. I had went to school with Ray and bumped into him one day on the train. He's like, "Hey, do you still you still act? I'm like, yeah, I still act. He's like, all right, I'm going to call you about something. And that's it. The rest, as they say, is history. He cast me in Strange Aeons. I met you, Pete, and then yeah, we've done a few projects together since then.
So, Anne, as somebody who has not really experienced a horror film in the making of process, what do you think of that story that Steve just told?
Funny and scary at the same time.
To me, it sounds kind of horrific until you said chocolate syrup, until you said you were covered in chocolate syrup, and then it just kind of becomes comical. And I guess, there is a thin line between horror and comedy, and sometimes it can get a little bit blurry. Anne, would you ever concede to that kind of an adventure? If somebody came up to you and said, hey, let me squirt you with chocolate syrup and wrap you in a sheet, throw you in a trunk, drive you around the neighborhood, and then drop you in a ditch. Would that sound like a good time or no?
No, not really, no.
To be fair, the real horror took place at the end of the day when I had to try to get the chocolate syrup out of my chest hair, which is when it's dried up and caked on is a lot more painful. So yeah, a lot of time in the shower after that one.
Yeah, I'd probably pass too, but I'm also not as hairy as you, so I don't know that it would really be that big of a problem. Well, again, Strange Aeons is not available. However, Ray was kind enough to allow me to use some clips of it in a feature film that we did a few years, well, more than a few years ago. Gee whiz. About 12 years ago, we made a film called Misery Loves Company. And you can see that film, and in that film, you can see some clips from Strange Aeons if you are curious. It is the black and white film footage that is shown at the movie theater, where the two characters, played by myself and Steven, work. But we'll talk about Misery Loves Company another day. Right now, let's get into the heart of it, the dark heart of Shocktober. Every year, in the month of October, I basically curate a month-long menu of the macabre. And it started out just as me on Halloween as a grown-up who was not going trick-or-treating but was kind of sticking around to give out candy to kids. And so all day I would just hang out and watch horror movies. I would just pick some of my favorites and I try to pick some of the ones that I haven't seen in a while or some that I had never seen before. And it went on like this for a little while. And then around 2015, a buddy of mine wanted to partake in it, and we scheduled something for every Friday night. Every Friday in 2015, we would do a double feature. And then, probably around 2018, I started making it a daily thing throughout the month of October. So, from October 1st to October 31st, we do 31 days of horror, and I program it, I curate it, I try to keep it fresh. Well, I try to keep it fresh for my wife. I try to show her stuff that she hasn't seen before because she's not a big horror fan, but she does enjoy the genre, and of course she loves the Halloween season, so it's kind of become a tradition around our household where I make up the schedule, and then every night in October we just watch whatever's planned. And so this year I decided to open it up. I mean, I always posted the schedule on social media, but this year I've specifically invited Anne and Steven to join me and to just commentate on some of the films so we can kick off this podcast. So we're going to discuss the first week's films, which include Duel from 1971, The Wraith from 1986, Rope from 1948. Wednesday was a wild card, which means anybody can pick anything they want to watch as long as it falls within the genre of horror, thriller, shock, terror, dark, what have you. Thursday, we picked it back up with Dead Alive, also known as Braindead, from 1992. And then we watched Barbarian from 2022, so just last year. So, how did we do, everyone? Anne, did you get to watch 7 movies this week?
No, I watched five movies this week.
And how did you do, Steve?
I watched 8 movies this week.
Wow.
3 of them last night, back to back to back.
And so the first movie we had was Duel from 1971, and it's not exactly a horror movie, but I don't know, would we agree it's a thriller?
Yeah, suspense. Definitely suspense.
Suspense thriller? I think the most interesting thing about this particular film is that it was directed by Steven Spielberg. It is, in fact, his first feature film as a director, and it started out as a television movie of the week, but it was so well received that the studio actually gave him additional funds and days to shoot, and they filled out the running time, and then released the movie internationally in Europe as a theatrical feature. So it's pretty remarkable in that sense alone. I mean, the film was originally aired in November of 1971, so it is over 50 years old. I mean, that's a heck of a way to start a career and a heck of a point to start as well. It has, of course, since been released on VHS and DVD and Blu-ray, and I mean, I first encountered this film when I was in junior high in English class. My teacher brought it up because it's based on a short story by Richard Matheson. If you're not familiar with Richard Matheson, he's an author and screenwriter. Most notably, his works include the novel I Am Legend, which has been made into a number of different movies over the years, What Dreams May Come, and of course, Somewhere in Time. But his short stories are also pretty phenomenal. He was a big inspiration on Stephen King, of course, and he did a lot of writing for television, including the original Twilight Zone series. Most notably, his work there includes the famous Nightmare at 20,000 Feet with the creature on the wing of the plane. He also wrote most of the Twilight Zone movie, which is also featured on our list, and we'll be visiting that in a couple of weeks.
Which, funnily, I have not, even though I'm a massive Twilight Zone fan, I have never seen the movie. I don't know why. I just haven't. I love the original series, and I had dabbled and watched a few of the remakes in the '80s when they turned them to color and they went an hour long. But yeah, I've always been like, I don't know. Like, I want to see it, but I have such a love for the original series that I don't. I've stayed away from it. It's overdue.
It's overdue. So, Duel. What was your experience with Duel?
Duel is like it's a movie that's been with me my entire life. I think I first saw Duel WPIX Channel 11 Shocktober. They always played that movie. That's like one of those movies that just stuck out of my mind. And I remember watching it and thinking it was terrifying about how this guy is just terrorized down the highway all alone. And then it's like as a kid the truck is like impending doom on wheels. But then as an adult, when I go back and I watch it, it's still terrifying because if anyone's ever driven or gotten stuck someplace or something's happened to them and you're by yourself, it could be pretty terrifying. So that movie always sticks with me. I own it on DVD. I think I watched it the last 2 years in a row because I do something similar where I try to watch a horror movie a night for the month of October. I never tire of that movie. I recommend it to anybody that I can. I think it's a great example of how to make a really confined story but maximize the outcome of it. I think it's a great look at very focused storytelling. I think it's a great way to look at a very focused production. And it doesn't have to be a lot of bells and whistles and fancy CGI and fancy effects. If you've got a good story and you've got a great director, it just, it works on its own. And I think it gave you a very early glimpse of what Steven Spielberg was going to be capable of. You see glimpses of Jaws in that. You see glimpses, some of his trademark shots. It's almost the birth of those. So, it's one of my favorites.
I completely agree. It is just a fantastic film. It's a lot of fun, and it's just a great exercise in a minimalist story and a minimalist, approach to filmmaking. There are not a lot of characters. The main character played by Dennis Weaver, David Mann, he pretty much carries the entire film. I mean, and the truck, not even the truck driver. I mean, you barely get a glimpse of the truck driver. It's really the truck becomes its own kind of entity, its own force that is pursuing this man throughout the desert. And I will say this, when I first saw the film, I was really young. I was not driving yet. I had no idea about, what was involved with it really, other than like you put in the gas and you put in the key and you go. So I'm watching this movie and the truck, which has its own personality. You look at the truck in this film, and across the front bumper are all these different license plates. And when I was a kid, I just remember thinking, like, oh, that's probably so he can drive through all these different states. He needs a different license plate for the different states he goes through because he's a truck. Come to realize that those license plates are probably the trophies from all of the cars that he's pursued as he's pursuing Dennis Weaver. So he's in fact kind of a serial killer truck.
Yeah.
So
his bragging rights.
We won't spoil anything more for you listening. And of course, we won't spoil anything for Anne because I do have a feeling like, Anne, do you want to see the film?
I want to see it now, especially because you said it's a glimpse of Joe's. And I think that's interesting to see a movie made before, So yeah, sure, it's interesting. I'd love to see it.
Yeah, first he began with Duel, and then he moved into the Sugarland Express, which is another kind of car chasing movie. Of course, it's a totally different genre, totally different story, but he's utilizing elements and experiences, and he's just building on that. And then he followed that up with, of course, Jaws, which again is the man being pursued by a vicious killing machine, let's just say. And so again, these are like the building blocks for his career that both Duel and Jaws kind of fall into that horror genre. So like I said, most people get their start in filmmaking through horror. So there you go, Duel. If you haven't seen it, Steve and I strongly recommend it, and I think Anne is on board to check it out as well.
It's coming out on 4K, I think, in like 2 weeks or something like that. So I'm probably going to upgrade because I just have just a basic DVD copy. So I'm going to definitely grab that one.
So next up, we watched The Wraith from 1986, starring Charlie Sheen. And this was another like WPIX, regular. I mean, it wasn't even exclusive to Shocktober. You could watch this movie. You could pretty much set your watch to a screening of The Wraith on WPIX. I mean, it was on like, as I remember, like almost every weekend, at least once a month. And, when you're a kid watching this movie and it's like it's teenagers in peril and there's this like ghost phantom guy, driving this sick car. And I mean, when you're a kid, The Wraith is probably just about the coolest movie ever made. Now, watching it as an adult, I mean, what do you think of The Wraith, Steve?
Still one of the coolest movies ever made.
Still one of the coolest movies ever made. And you've never heard of The Wraith before, right?
That's crazy. No, I never heard of it before. And Charlie Sheen is not so famous here. We know him for the TV show. I don't know how you call it here in America. In France, it's My Uncle Charlie. I guess that's the same name, no?
2.5 Men?
2.5 Men is what we call it in the United States.
Oh, okay.
So he's not really famous in France except for that show.
So it was interesting to see that. It's quite sexy, actually. I was surprised. For any woman listening, yes, just watch it for that because he was really sexy when he was young.
Yeah, he was.
For me, the movie is how to say that. For me, it's a men's movie. As you know, Pete. For me, they are men's movies sometimes. I understand this movie was made in the 80s. So watching it now, it's like watching Grease, It's the smell of the 80s. You have the music, the hair, the clothes. So it's quite funny to watch. Yeah.
That's the scariest part of the movie is Clint Howard's hair, I think.
Yeah, probably.
Well, his hairstyle is modeled off of Jack Nance from Eraserhead.
That's what I figured.
So there's a little David Lynch connection. But Anne, you were saying something?
Yeah, I just wanted to say something because I watched it in French. And I was surprised because the title in French is Turbo Interceptor. And actually, you understand at the end of the movie, that's the name of the car. And I didn't understand why they called it that way. I mean, it doesn't make any sense because it sounds like the movie is about the car, but actually, it's not about the car. It's about the Phantom, So I'm not spoiling too much, but it's that's the funny thing. I was surprised that they called the movie Turbo Interceptor.
Well, again, being released in the 1980s, I mean, the name Turbo Interceptor, it does sound kind of sexy, and I mean, they were probably just appealing to the market, in the the French market and even the German market with the Autobahn. But I mean, of course, in France, you guys have the famous race in Le Mans.
Oh yes, I know. It's my home city, Le Mans. I know very well.
Yeah, for me, I mean, this movie is, I have not watched this movie in at least 15 years, but it's one of the ones that I watched so much when I was a kid that like I can just close my eyes and be there. But there is a very distinct difference between a memory and an experience, and experiencing this movie again as an adult, I don't know, I feel like there's definitely a thick layer of that 80s cheese across the top of
Mm-hmm.
it.
Yeah.
I will say this though, I can't connect with Anne on the sexiness of Charlie Sheen. However, Nick Cassavetes is the reason I will rewatch this movie again. His performance as Packard Walsh was just incredible.
Yeah.
He's the main villain, and he's the reason to check out this film for sure. He gives a strong performance, and I mean, he's a monster of a man. I mean, he dwarfs Randy Quaid when he's standing next to him. I mean, the guy's like 6'6". He's just
Yeah,
massive.
he's big.
But that's my takeaway for the movie. I mean, Charlie Sheen, he's only really in the movie for about 30 minutes. I mean, he filmed this on his way to the Philippines to shoot Platoon, you know. This was like a weekend gig for him to pick up some extra blow money or something.
Yeah, watching it again. I mean, I watch it almost once a year. I still love it. I see definitely what you say, the cheese factor. I think for me the biggest problem in that department is Skank and the other lackey. They're the worst part of the film for me. If you minimize those two guys, we got a solid film. Because I like that the film isn't very polished. I like that the film doesn't feel very studio. There's a kind of roughness about it. There's a kind of a like an outlaw kind of quality about it, and especially when you have this being or whatever this is that inhabits the guy in the car, the rough around the edges part of that is very appealing. Not to mention that the car is just completely badass. I mean, it's one of the most badass cars I think that's ever been put on the big screen for my money. So when you have all that mixed in, it kind of feels like a bit of an outlaw movie, and I like that. But like I said, those two guys, I think if they got just a little more of them edited out, I think it'd be okay. You disagree?
I don't know. For me, I have a little fondness for Skank and Gutter Boy. I mean, they definitely date the movie. I mean, if they were removed from this film, it would be a little bit more timeless in its existence. But I mean, they had some really good interactions. They were kind of the comic relief, and I mean, especially Skank. You know, I have a fondness for that actor, David Sherrill. He a couple years after this film, he appeared in an episode of 21 Jump Street where he played the punk rock
Yes.
bad boy singer of the KKK, the Clean Cut Kids, in the season 1 finale of 21 Jump Street. And that's one of my favorite episodes. So for me, whenever I see
Yeah.
that actor, I always think of that episode. And I have just a fondness for it. And so that transcends to the character of Skank. I do feel like the gang was a little big though, and you know maybe the first two casualties of the Wraith, you know, if they weren't there to begin with, it maybe would have just made it a little bit more
Yeah,
digestible.
I
It
agree.
really seemed like the deck was sort of stacked in Packard's gang.
Yeah.
When I was programming the film and I was thinking about the plot and the story and everything again, I came to realize that this film is basically The Crow.
Oh yeah. That was my next comment. If no one else was going to say it, this especially with a character named Skank.
Yeah, exactly.
Like the book wasn't even written yet, so it's not just like before the film. Like it's before the graphic novel. So this is the Crow basically. Just instead of a crow, we have a car as the conduit. So
My wife actually described this film after watching it as a cross between The Crow and Pinocchio.
that's an interesting take. How did she land on Pinocchio?
Because by the end, he's a real boy.
Oh, okay.
Oh, okay. Oh, that's poetic, the way she sees that. I don't know.
And so our next film was Rope. directed by Alfred Hitchcock, and it's not exactly a horror film. Of course, Hitchcock is a master of suspense and thrillers. He's dabbled in horror, of course, with Psycho, and I would even go so far as to say The Birds. But Rope is, a little bit different. It falls into the thriller category for sure. It does deal with murder, which is horrific. Technically speaking, though, Rope is pretty fascinating, just with regard to the way they filmed it. I mean, it's a very tight story. It's only 80 minutes long, and there are only, I think, about 10 cuts in the film because they filmed the entire magazine of film. They shot it like a play, and then they just put the reels together with the best takes. It's really an exercise in just minimalist filmmaking, and it's really just fascinating to watch. You think of films like Birdman, which is probably a more recent example of this technique or this exercise. It gives the illusion, but it's not the genuine article, and Rope really is kind of the genuine article in that regard. And Steven, you missed this one, so
I
you
missed
can
this one,
cover your
unfortunately.
ears and hum if you want. But Anne, what was your experience with Rope?
I loved it. I was surprised, but I loved it. For me, it's a fantastic claustrophobic atmosphere. I don't know if you would say that, but I love the characters, all of them. They really have their own identity, and you have empathy for all of them, even the murderers. I won't tell anything, but yeah, it's really from the beginning to the end. You want to know. You want to know how it's gonna end, and the end is as you said, is very theatrical. I love James Stewart. That's the second movie you made me know about him. The first one was It's a Beautiful Life, because to be honest with you, I didn't really know this actor before. And he's fantastic. This actor is really, really great. And there's just one thing I was surprised of. Maybe you can explain to me, but there are 2 times or 3 times they focus on the back of a jacket to end the scene and then to get back to another scene. It's a bit weird because you have a black screen for a second.
Right. That is actually where they are hiding the cut.
Mm.
That is where one roll of film ended, and then the camera moves behind an actor at that precise moment, and as they move behind them, they insert a black frame, and that's where they put the cut. So the camera move continues around the character to continue the shot, continue the scene, continue the story. But yeah, I completely agree. All of the characters and all of the actors are just top-notch in this particular story. And James Stewart, of course, he's one of the greatest of all time. And It's a Wonderful Life, we'll probably talk about that in a later podcast in this series. But in Rope, this was shortly after It's a Wonderful Life, and I'm not exactly sure, but I think this was his first collaboration with Alfred Hitchcock. He then went on to film Rear Window and, of course, Vertigo. And I believe he was considered for the lead in North by Northwest, but Hitchcock decided to go with Cary Grant instead. Either way, I think it would have been very, very interesting. But yeah, James Stewart, he's definitely worth watching the film for. But the other two actors, Farley, Granger, and Dall, they, I'm just going to say it because it happens in the first scene. We're not really spoiling too much. They are the murderers. The film begins with the murder, and then it kind of becomes a matter of, are they going to get away with it? Are they not going to get away with it?
Yeah.
And in the midst of this, they decide to throw a lavish dinner party at the crime scene moments after it's been committed. So they are just on a high from this experience and are rolling with it. And, it's kind of fun to see the wheels come off the train,
Yeah.
But yeah, this film, I first saw it probably about 15 years ago on DVD through Netflix. I rented it because it was not really... It's not like Psycho or The Birds or North by Northwest. It's not a readily available Hitchcock film. And it's not a very common Hitchcock film. It's one you kind of have to hunt for or dig for. Especially before streaming was available and renting on demand was available, This film, for a long time, it was sort of considered a failed experiment, and it didn't do well financially, so it was just kind of a lost Hitchcock film for a long time. And as his filmography began to get appreciated and explored more, it resurfaced along with a couple of other films like Rear Window and Vertigo and went through a restoration process. And now it's sort of looked at in a much different light than it was in its day. So I strongly recommend pretty much any Hitchcock film, any James Stewart film, but especially this one because, again, it's only 80 minutes. It's a very tight story. And the other cool thing, the film is only 80 minutes. It doesn't feel like 80 minutes. Of course, it takes place over the course of an evening, which is maybe like 3 or 4 hours of experience, but you as an audience member experience the whole story in a very tight 80 minutes. Did it feel like 80 minutes to you?
No, it didn't feel that. Yeah, I agree with you. It's you're really into the story from the beginning to the end, so you don't feel 80 minutes. Really, I agree.
I think part of the way they were able to achieve that, well, first of all, they were utilizing the set and the background setting. A big part of the film takes place in a sort of living room area with this gigantic window overlooking the city, and so you can actually see the sky change colors. You can see the clouds moving. It was a very elaborate set that they built for this particular film. So it helps you as an audience member experience the passage of time. They change it in between each of those cuts that I mentioned. But the dialogue is also delivered in such a stacked way that there's no dead air. There's no real space. Everybody is just on top of each other consistently with their delivery, with their quips, with their remarks, with their exchanges. So you get a lot more out of the experience of just sitting and listening and watching people talk than you would in real life. It's like, oh, well, they talked about a lot of stuff and there were a lot of moments and a lot of scenes, so your mind kind of just, it recalibrates the timeline. It's pretty fantastic.
And about the light, I agree with you. I was stunned that it starts during the day, so they tell you that they are during the day, because you, quite all the movie, you're in front of the window, so you see the light outside. And suddenly during the story, they say, oh, at night, we're at night. And it's true that it was night behind them, but you're so into the story that I didn't notice that the light changed. So yeah, it's really well done, really.
So Steve, you think you're going to check out Rope now? You think you're going to make maybe a little bit more effort?
Well, definitely, but like you said, it's not one of those that's readily available. It's not streaming anywhere, and my library had one copy and someone had it. So, it was just out of luck. But yeah, I'm definitely going to check it out.
Cool. Yeah, well, when you do finally track it down, let us know what you think, because I'm curious about what your experience with it will be.
I definitely will.
Wednesday was a wild card, and I don't know that you guys were playing as strict as I was. Mm-hmm. I was really sticking to the schedule. And so when Wednesday came around, we had a wild card, and I asked my wife, all right, we got a wild card. What do you want to watch? And she was like, well, I don't know. And so we start looking around, and I found this movie called Malignant, which is a newer film. I believe it came out about 2 years ago, 2021. And it's directed by James Wan, who directed Saw and The Conjuring, which I really enjoyed both of those films. I can't speak for his whole filmography, but Saw 1 and The Conjuring 1, I really enjoyed. And so I told my wife, and she was like, yeah, those were cool. Let's check it out. Well, we got about 20 minutes into the film, and then this shadow apparition thing showed up, and my wife just checked out. She was done with the film for the night. Malignant got the break. We just put the brakes on, but we had to watch a film. So I started looking around again, and I found a film called 10 Cloverfield Lane, which is the sequel to Cloverfield. And I personally really didn't like Cloverfield for a number of reasons, mostly T.J. Miller and the fact that he was holding the camera and it's a handheld found footage film, and that just didn't do it for me. But 10 Cloverfield Lane stars John Goodman, and I gotta say, I was pleasantly surprised by 10 Cloverfield Lane. Yeah. Have you guys seen 10 Cloverfield Lane or heard of it?
I've heard of it, I haven't seen it.
Never heard of it.
Okay, well then I won't ruin it for you. I will simply recommend 10 Cloverfield Lane for anybody who's interested. And anybody who's listening, John Goodman is fantastic. And the rest of the cast is really good too. And the story has a lot of really good twists and turns. And it was actually a lot of fun. So I strongly recommend 10 Cloverfield Lane as a wild card for anybody who's interested.
Well, I watched Smile. I think it was the highest grossing horror film of 2022. I am also very, I don't have a lot of hope or faith in newer horror movies. Every once in a while, something really good will come out. For the most part, I feel like it's all stuff that's just been done already, been just people going to do it again, So if it's a haunting movie, it's like, well, we had Amityville, or if it's an exorcism movie, well, we have The Exorcist. I feel like it's always I feel like in most cases, the best of the genre or the subgenre has already come out, and now we're just trying to, tack on something else. But I watched Smile, and I was pleasantly surprised. I won't give anything away in case you guys want to watch it, but I will say the main actress, who is, I believe, Kevin Bacon's daughter, did a great job. I thought it was a very simple story. It was very direct storytelling. I thought the pacing was great. I don't think there was anything wasted as far as time. I thought it was edited pretty well. There's a couple of really good scares in there, and it's one of those movies where it's like some unknown entity is now after people. So I don't know exactly what genre. It's not a slasher, but it's just like this unknown demon or creature or thing is going after people in a certain way. I'm not going to spoil. Like I said, I won't spoil anything. But I thought it was a very good movie, and I could see why it made the money that it did. I can see why it was very popular, given all the other things that were coming out around that time. So yeah, I recommend it for anyone who wants to watch it. I think it was like an hour and a half, hour and 40 minutes maybe. So not a big investment, and like I said, very very quick and to the point.
That's kind of how 10 Cloverfield Lane was as well. It's only about 100 minutes. It gets in, it does what it needs to do, and then it lets you go. And I'm going to go ahead and guess that you have not seen Smile. So what did you watch for your wild card?
I watched the latest movie of Luc Besson, which is DogMan. I don't know if it's a success in America or not, but I loved it. Really, I love Luc Besson, I must say. But really, the main character is played by Caleb Landry Jones. And I really hope he's going to have an Oscar because the performance is mind-blowing, you say. So from the beginning to the end is intriguing, is endearing, and that's a fantastic story. That the story of a man who had so many problems in his life. He had a terrible, violent childhood. Even after that, he had an accident and he can't walk anymore. He lives in a wheelchair. And he finds salvation in the love of dogs. I know it sounds weird, but that's a fantastic movie, really, especially when you love dogs. Yeah, yeah.
So this is a horror film?
That's a drama thriller movie. You have lots of blood, so for me it works.
Okay, so it may or may not meet the criteria, but for Anne's taste, it met the criteria. It sounds like...
There's always a good occasion to talk about Luc Besson, that's why. And the music is fantastic. The music is by Eric Serra. I don't know if you know about him. He always makes the music for Luc Besson's movie. So really, the photography is beautiful. It's a blue and dark photography all the time. So really, you should go to see it.
Okay. Dogman?
Dogman, yeah.
Dogman by Luc Besson. Okay, all right.
For me, for the time being, it's the best movie of 2023, for the time being.
Well, yeah, I haven't even heard of it except for my conversation with you, so I'll keep an eye out for it for sure. Moving on, I think this next film is kind of the main event of the week, really. I mean, it is, it's considered probably the bloodiest movie ever made, or at least one of the bloodiest movies ever made, simply because of the amount that they used. I think it was like 300 gallons of blood were used in the climax of this film. But, of course, I'm talking about Peter Jackson's immortal classic, Dead Alive, or as it was originally known, Braindead, from 1992. I saw this movie probably in 1993 at a sleepover, so I was probably about like 10 or 11 years old the first time I saw this film. And again, this is Peter Jackson. This is Mr. Lord of the Rings. This is the guy who kind of put New Zealand on the map for filmmaking as a location. And here he is, and all of his genuine splatter, gory storytelling. I mean, this is his third feature film after Meet the Feebles and his premiere debut film, Bad Taste. And it's kind of the culmination of everything that, again, like Jaws was Spielberg's culmination. I've Arrived. This film, I believe, is Peter Jackson's, like, kind of exclamation point on that part of his career, because from there he transitioned into, I mean, he still dealt with dark themes, but his next film was Heavenly Creatures with Kate Winslet. And from there he went on to The Frighteners with Michael J. Fox. And then, of course, Lord of the Rings, which has dark elements and creatures, orcs and everything. So it's really in these early films of his, though, that you get a sense of his ability and his capability and his ability to direct in extreme situations and circumstances and manage large casts and a lot of action and a lot of activity. So for me, watching this film now after living with Lord of the Rings for the last 20 years, I mean, the whole time I'm watching this movie, I'm just thinking, how is this man on Disney Plus? How did this man sweep the Oscars? It's like you watch Dead Alive, Braindead, and it's an experience for sure. And so, of course, I had seen it when I was young and I had the VHS, but I don't think you guys had seen it yet, right? This was new for both of you?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, so Anne, what was your experience?
I see a similarity between The Lord of the Rings and this movie, actually. I don't know if you will agree with me, but especially on the main character, I think the personality is quite the same as Frodo, because they're both caught between two stools. Frodo, he wants to live in his shire, or but he has the burden, of the ring, and he have to do his duty. And this character, I think his name is Lionel, I'm not sure, something like that, and is caught between his love for his mother and his new love, the girl Paquita. So I felt the same empathy for him and for Frodo. So when it's a Peter Jackson's movie, you can see these similarities. I feel that way.
Yeah, I can see that too. And of course, I mean, the film was written by Peter Jackson, but also, it was co-written by his wife, Fran Walsh, who also wrote The Lord of the Rings. They are a writing team. So you have these similar story handlers and these similar voices working. Of course, there's going to be some type of theatrical or thematical overlaps. Steve, what was your experience with Dead Alive?
I didn't like it. Gonna be honest. I feel like in the very much the same vein as Evil Dead. Only I think Evil Dead's superior. I mean, don't get me wrong. I had some fun with some of these scenes. I mean, my favorite part is the scene with the priest who comes out and has his whole kung fu section. To me, that was that I laughed. I couldn't stop laughing. My brother actually watched it with me, so we were laughing hysterically at that, and I wanted more of that guy, and I didn't get more of that guy, and I was kind of like, yeah, all right, well, that was that, but I feel like also I do see the influences that it's had on such films as Shaun of the Dead. And I feel that's the problem for me, is it wasn't as good as Evil Dead, which inspired Dead Alive, and it wasn't as good as Shaun of the Dead, which was inspired by Dead Alive. So I feel like it kind of just falls in the middle, and it's like the predecessor is better, the successor is better, and this is kind of just there for me. I mean, while I was impressive with the amount of people and blood, and don't get me wrong, there's some really cool stuff, there's some really cool gory action moments, and I don't shy away from that kind of stuff. I don't seek it out, the extreme gore, but also if it's there, it's fine. It doesn't bother me too much. But I just feel like I don't know what he was trying to say with the film. It's like, okay, here's this guy, and he's got a bit of a Norman Bates, kind of a, Owen, throw a moment from the train kind of a situation going on. For me, I just, I felt a little disappointed by it.
Yeah, I can understand what you mean, because if you were looking for a movie, a fantastic movie, because it's made by Peter Jackson, of course you're gonna be disappointed. If you think it's a horror movie because Pete told you to watch it during the Shocktober, of course you're gonna be disappointed. But if you know that it's kind of I don't know if you use that term in English, but burlesque movie, it's kind of so stupid
Mm-hmm.
that it turns out to be very funny. It's pleasant to watch
Right.
if you have that in mind.
Yeah, I didn't know what to expect because I've seen the box in the video store years ago, and I've seen the and I've heard about it, but I knew nothing about the movie going into it. That first scene, I'm like, are these guys just really bad actors, or is this on purpose? And then as you go through it, like I'm still not sure.
Ah,
It wasn't as good as Evil Dead. It wasn't as good as Shaun of the Dead. It kind of was just dead. But that's me. That's my take on that one.
And that's fair. I mean, I'm kind of in the middle. I saw it first when I was a kid, so my connection to it is a little bit different. This was kind of the first Peter Jackson film I saw, so in my mind, this is like zero. This is like where our relationship begins. And I mean, I remember when I went to go see Lord of the Rings, Fellowship of the Ring, I'm watching it thinking like, wow, this is the guy who made Dead Alive. And as I'm watching Lord of the Rings, I see some of like the handheld shots, like when Gandalf first walks into Bilbo's hobbit hole, and it's like, wow, that's a Peter Jackson shot. Yeah, like this is the same guy. Like, wow. It was like an incredible connection, and I'm always fascinated by that. As a filmmaker, just seeing other filmmakers work, especially their earlier work, their less polished work. For me, it's interesting and it's exciting because you get to kind of see what they did with their means, Again, like all of his early films that I mentioned before, they were independent films. And again, they're horror films. So it's tapping into basically the genesis for this conversation is that you start with horror. And sometimes there's a blurry line between horror and comedy. And I feel like Dead Alive, it just goes for it. It's like he took every perverse or horrible or wrong idea you could like possibly have and put it into this movie. There's some gross out humor and
well, that's the truth.
Everything in the kitchen sink is in this film. There's a love story, there's a bizarre love triangle between the mother and the love interest, there's all these elements, there's a rat monkey. It's just, there's fantastic creature effects. It's just really, really fun for me as a filmmaker. It's fun to see the stop motion animation that he utilized. I mean, I often do have conflicts with people when it comes to film because I watch it from a different perspective. This whole month, we're watching horror movies, right? And my wife is amazed that I never jump at jump scares. I'll just lay there like a corpse watching the movie. And she's like jumping out of her chair and flinching and, covering her eyes, like waiting for it. And then it gets her anyway. And me, I'm just laying there like I'm on Valium. Like, I just cannot be fazed by this because I'm watching it from such a different approach with the storytelling, with the technique and the filmmaking. But yeah, Dead Alive, I mean, I think historically speaking, it's significant because of Peter Jackson's career. And again, this is kind of like the pinnacle of this type of film for him. It was really like all out. There's no going back. Let's just get it done, and then move on to much, much greater things. So for me, I don't know, Steve, maybe you'll revisit it one day with a sense of nostalgia and be like, oh yeah, this movie.
Possibly. I don't know if it's going to become a favorite, but it was interesting.
I do agree the scene with the priest in the cemetery is one of the big highlights for the film, but yeah. Anne, anything else on Dead Alive?
yeah, I wanted to say that I noticed that the end is not really an end. So maybe one day Peter Jackson will do the second one. We never know.
That is true too. It does kind of keep it open. That is a good point.
Yeah.
So, okay, so Dead Alive, I say yay, Steve says nay, and Anne says maybe, which brings us to Friday, Barbarian. And this is part of the new horror that Steve is less than fond of. And I myself, I have mixed feelings about new horror because I tend to agree with Steve. There's a lot that we've already seen. Even in my introduction to this whole thing, it's such a vast landscape. The horror landscape, there's so many, many layers and directions and genres and subgenres and degrees of production and degrees of quality that you really don't know what you're going to get. And especially with the new stuff, I mean, Barbarian, it came highly recommended to me. And I gotta say, I was disappointed. I was pretty disappointed by Barbarian. I mean, it has a pretty interesting setup. The cast and the performances were good, but the story and the writing were really not doing it for me to the point where I was like, I just checked out because there was no way that characters are going to be that stupid. I'm sorry. It was as though the writer-director bought a book called How to Write a Horror Movie. And he basically took every cliche that was in that book, put it into a script, and then somehow got Justin Long and Bill Skarsgård, who have a history of horror with Jeepers Creepers and Drag Me to Hell and, of course, It, to appear in it. I could see why some people would like it, but the more you think about it, and as you're watching it, if you're thinking, like I said, when I watch a film, I'm thinking about it in a different way. In this movie, the suspension of disbelief was not there. I could not commit to the story because I couldn't believe the characters were that stupid. I thought the beginning was really a lot of fun until it got into the tunnel. And once Keith had to go down there, and had to keep going down there, it was like, I don't know. And then she followed him after specifically stating, I'm not going back down there. You lost me. At that point, I was just like waiting for the clock to run out. It came back a little bit when Justin Long showed up, but then as it went on, his character just became kind of your typical disposable horror film character. Like, he wasn't a hero. You weren't really rooting for him. And I mean, his personality was just trash. The main character, though, she was cool, but again, she was like in and out with her characteristics. Like, sometimes she's really smart and the voice of reason, and sometimes she's really dumb and doing stupid stuff. Mm-hmm. And I just couldn't reconcile that, you know? I guess my final point is with regard to the bad writing, okay? I mean, at one point she does track down some police officers and she's talking to them about, oh, well, blah, 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 blah. And I just escaped from this situation, and you got to come help, and there's a guy down there. And the cops, they sort of humor her, but not really. And it's just like, why did they even show up if they weren't going to do anything? A. B. Okay, so now they're at this situation where, like, somebody could potentially be in danger. They see some evidence of danger, but they get a call of shots fired, and they leave to go check that out, which is miles away. And they're in the middle of a situation, like, it's just bad writing, which is convenient writing. And it's like, well, we got to move this along, so let's just put some bullshit here, and then we can say we did it and move on. So I'm sorry for anybody who liked Barbarian, but...
Yeah, no, I'm right there with you. I mean, I watched this, I believe, last year, and I had heard good things about it, and I was like, all right, well, I'll give it a shot. And the only reason I ever watched it again was for this podcast specifically. So I was like, all right, for Pete, I'll sit through this one again. Maybe I'll have a different take. Maybe I'll have a different appreciation. No, I'm right there with you. I think right up until the point where Bill Skarsgård has to go down to the basement, that's where the movie just falls off the rails. I think it was a really good in the beginning. Some pretty good writing, some good spooky setups, some kind of good scares. But I think it would have been far more intriguing if you found out that Bill Skarsgård is the problem. Like, this was an elaborate scheme. Like, he owned the property. It wasn't double booked. Now he's holding her prisoner, and now she's got to escape. For me, that would have been far greater payoff than some weird inbred, Hills Have Eyes backwards type monster thing. Which, side note, I am so sick and tired of seeing old lady boob, like saggy, weird. Like, I feel like it's become a new thing. Like, hey, let's throw that in there. If I never saw another one again, I'd be fine with it. Like, they did it in It. They did it in this. I think there's a slight one in Hereditary. I don't need to see any more saggy in this stringy hair old lady phantom boob thing. I've hit my limit. I've maxed out on that. I understand that she's inbred and she's got a lot of deformities, and her whole appearance is whacked out. The superhuman strength thing, though, like, is just like, she's like an X-Men now. It's that we've left the realm of like, this is believable. Now she's diving off of things. She's getting crushed. We're like somewhere between John Wick and Wolverine with the abilities, and I'm like, pick a lane and stay in it. Are we talking about a grounded horror movie, or now we're talking about like superhuman strength and abilities? Again, they tried to do that elevated thing where, like, okay, well, the guy who owned the house back in the day, was a creep and a stalker and a rapist and a murderer and a whatever. And I see how you're tying that to the Justin Long character, but then that really doesn't ever pay off for either one of those characters. And it's not like Justin Long learns a lesson Like you think he does, but then he doesn't. And then like I see what you tried to do, but then you didn't finish either one of those stories. It kind of just, well, that's how that ended. And that's kind of how I felt, like, oh, that's how that ended. I couldn't suspend disbelief, like you said, anymore past a certain point. And I think when she's in the tunnel and she runs the opposite direction from which she came, you know how you got in there, hon. Same way as the way out, because you don't know what's over there, on the dark side of things. So yeah, for me, this one is a big no. Again, I've seen it twice now. I don't think I'll ever watch it again, but it's a no.
And what was your experience? Because again, I'm sure you didn't see it before, so what are your thoughts?
To be honest, for me, that's the only horror movie I watched this week. Because the others, I wasn't really scared. This one, I was a bit scared sometimes. So, yeah, but you said quite everything. I agree with you regarding the girl. Her reactions are really not something that anybody would do, even from the beginning, to be honest with you. As a woman, I understand the situation. She can't find another hotel. She has to stay with the guy. I understand. So she take the room, okay. But you don't drink wine with a stranger all night long. I mean, it doesn't make any sense. I mean, so from the beginning, I was like, what? And when she finally escaped and she came back, I understand they want to tell you that she's really loyal. She doesn't want to let someone in a bad situation. So that's really noble from her, but that's not realistic. So totally agree with you. Anyway, I think that the makeup was really great, um, especially for the breastfeeding scene. Um, it was really impressive, really disgusting then. We all agree on that. And I really loved the performance of the actress. So I took her name, Georgina Campbell. I think even if we don't like the character, the performance was really great.
Yeah, I agree. The performances were good, but the writing was really not. And I also agree with Steve, like let's just say the first third of the film. I was kind of suspecting like Bill Skarsgård, Keith, to be the barbarian of the story. I was expecting it all to be a ruse that he owned the house and he was doing like dastardly deeds somewhere in the basement or whatever. Like I thought he was going to be the bad guy. And on one hand, I was happy that my expectations were not met because like I don't want to know the story that I'm watching. But on the other hand, I wish they would have done a little bit better of a job with that twist and that turn, again, he goes into the tunnel against all logic and then we find out like, oh yeah, this is actually a really different kind of situation and story. And like, that's cool, but it was just bad writing. And I really have a hard time with bad writing.
Yeah, I agree with that. Just the whole set of circumstances surrounding, like you said, I'm not going to go back down there again. All right, I'll go back down there again. Like it's like she checked her watch real quick. I've got 5.
Yeah.
And then is descent down into the basement again. It's like you can't write out of convenience. If you put your characters in a set of circumstances, you have to see that through. And if you don't want them to end up in a certain position, whether physically or otherwise, then don't put them in that position. I think that could be easily avoided. It's also interesting that Justin Long is not fazed at all by the fact that there's a mattress, a camera, and a bucket in that room.
Yeah.
I just like that's normal goings on. Now, anyway, these measurements, that I found to be funny. He just cares about the real estate aspect of it.
Right, and for all the stuff they set up with his character and being, kind of a realistic monster or douchebag, for lack of a better word, I mean, instead of his fate that he meets in the movie, it may have been stronger for him to have been discovered with that kind of a house and that kind of a situation. And then, like, he really is, just forced into a world of exile. That could have been like a worse fate for somebody of that nature. It's like, yeah, you had it all and you blew it. And you blew it so hard that it blew back at you,
For me, the main idea that you have barbarians in a hidden room in your house is really original. I'm not a big fan of horror movies, so the main idea of the movie was original for me. It's just the way they developed it. I agree that they could have done something much better, but yeah, the original idea is something atypical for a horror movie, I guess.
So if the whole first act happens the way the whole first act takes place, and then we've come to find out that Bill Skarsgård actually is the villain in that situation, like he preyed on her just enough, he gave her just enough to trust him, and then when he puts himself in a position where she thinks he's in trouble, that's how he catches her, right? Not just in the, oh, we're double booked, this is simple, I'm just going to break into your room, I got you. The psychology of that and the mental ramifications of that keeps the audience off balance. And then if you would go to Justin Long and you believe that he's a good guy, or maybe do the reverse, we all think he's a bad guy and he did rape this other actress, but then come to find out he didn't do anything at all, and it would mess with the audience's perception of who is a barbarian or who is the aggressor. And then if you showed a little bit more of the previous owner in that flashback and fleshed that out a little bit, you could. So if you want to do the social commentary thing, or if you want to do the elevated horror thing, then really explore each one of those themes and mess with the audience's perception of who they think the aggressor or the problem character is in those situations. I think that would have been more gratifying than what we got.
Should we be writing this down? Should we all be writing this movie down and make like the good one? You know, is that what this is getting at here? Like, this is just one big brainstorming session now of how to fix broken Hollywood horror tropes. When I was watching this film, there's an episode of The X-Files called Home about an inbred family that lives on a farm. And the whole time I'm watching this movie, I'm just thinking about that episode of The X-Files. And I'm just disconnecting from this movie even more because I've seen this story before. It's not exactly the same. And, you know, like Anne said, there are some good setups there. I really like the cinematography. Mm-hmm. It's a beautiful looking film. The performances were really good. The actors were really good. But it's just the story and the writing where the film falls apart. And like, that's the foundation. That's the blueprint. That should be the strongest part of the film.
Yeah, but right. We've seen these stories play out before. So, you know, what's new?
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think we've covered a lot. You know, we're approaching the end here, but I want to know, this coming week, we've got a new slate of films. Tonight, we've got Dark City, and then The Black Phone, The Sentinel, The Ninth Configuration, The Babadook, Suburban Screams. You know, so what are you guys looking forward to this week?
Yeah, I think next week's gonna be scarier than this week, but we'll see. Yeah, I would like to see the Babadook because you told me it's an Australian movie, right? And I lived in Australia. I don't know this movie though, so I feel bad. And I saw that the Black Phone. I saw the poster and it seems cool. It seems scary, but it seems cool. So yeah, I would like to see those two movies, and I will try to watch the 4 Alien movies. I will try.
All 4 Alien movies?
Yeah, I'm trying. Yeah.
All 4 Alien movies for Anne. She's coming at us with both barrels loaded next week, so let's keep an eye out for her. Steve, what are you looking forward to this week? Have you seen all these movies?
Well, I've seen Black Phone, I think, last year as part of my one a day. I'm going to watch it again, though, just so we could talk about it, so I have it clear in my head. I mean, I remember it pretty well, but just some of the finer points, I'll be sharp about it. I'm looking forward to the Babadook because I haven't seen it. It's been on my list for a while, and it's just one that keeps getting reshuffled around when I have other things to watch or to do. And Dark City, I feel like I saw once, maybe like in 1999. So that's definitely a revisit. And the other ones I have not seen. So, but that's what's good about this, because there's a lot of movies that I haven't seen that I want to see. And this gives me a perfect reason to watch those movies in case something else, you know, because I'll always watch Back to the Future or, you know, any one of my favorite movies 1,000 times. And sometimes I need to just break away from that and actually watch something I haven't seen and broaden the old horizons. So
yeah, that's part of why I do this. I mean, this really started, the 31-day adventure started because I wanted to spend time with my wife. And with 2 small kids, as you probably know or suspect, we don't get a whole lot of time together or quality time. And we certainly don't get to go out on dates as much as we used to. So in this regard, at least we know every October we're going to have a movie night. And sometimes there'll be something fresh for both of us. Sometimes there'll be something I'm sharing with her, and sometimes there'll be something I'm sharing that I myself have forgotten. So this week, we're watching some of my favorites here. The Ninth Configuration is one of my all-time favorite films. So I'm excited to watch that with her. She's never seen it, but I've never seen Dark City. I remember it came out when I was, I think, in high school, and a lot of people were talking about it, and then, it's the same director who did The Crows, so I was like, I'm curious, to check it out. And I love Jennifer Connelly, so I'm excited to check out Dark City tonight. And then The Black Phone, I've heard good things about it. We'll find out tomorrow night, and we'll discuss it next week. But yeah, and then of course Suburban Screams is John Carpenter's return to directing, so the fact that it's true crime and true horror, that's sort of also exciting. I know Anne is not able to check that one out yet because of distribution. It has not been figured out for Europe and France yet, but she will be checking out another John Carpenter film in its place, and we'll discuss that as well. So that's about it for this week. Does anybody have anything else they'd like to share?
It was enough for me for the week.
Well, I know Thursday I'm going to have to swap one of my days because Thursday night I'm actually going to the Alamo to see The Thing.
That's cool.
On the big screen. So.
Okay, well, that about does it for the Visually Hidden podcast today. I'm Peter O'Brien, joined with Anne Milleville and Steven Bendler. You can catch them on Instagram. Steve runs Steve's Pop Culture Corner on Instagram, so search for him because he's always posting exciting things related to popular culture, movies, toys, games, cereal. You name it, he's into it. And Anne and I are, of course, both on Letterboxd, so there'll be links to that in the description as well, and you can check out what we're watching and what we think of it over there. Until next time, this is Peter O'Brien reminding you to take your lens cap off and stay focused. Bye-bye.